tall spindle apple planting right for your backyard? I want to talk about that today. Actually, I intended to do a video just talking about the tall spindle, the vertical axis, and the more traditional semi-dwarf planting systems, but there was just too much information to try to cram into one video. So we're going to focus just on the tall spindle today. Some of you may have trees ordered, you may have an orchard planned for the spring, and I just wanted to let you know what's available to you, what's out there, and what I've learned with these systems as a homeowner, because some of the pluses and minuses are a little different from a homeowner's perspective than they are for maybe a bigger orchard that's now planting these systems. So the tall spindle system, what is it? It sounds kind of scientific, doesn't it? Tall spindle, don't let that scare you off. It's just a series of dwarf trees like you see behind you, and these trees are planted about 3 feet apart, depending on the vigor of the tree, but hey, we're just going to say they're 3 feet apart. And you can put 10 trees in a space about 30 feet long. Give yourself 6 feet for them to reach out just a little bit, and in a space of 30 feet by 6 feet, you could plant 10 dwarf apple trees. Now, I like that. I really do. I think that's neat. Maybe your total footprint would be about 40 feet long when you consider that you're going to support the trellis and that kind of thing, but it still isn't taking up a whole lot of space for what you're getting. 10 different varieties of apple trees in that 30-foot space if you wanted to. I always would typically plant at least 2 or 3 of the same variety just to ensure I'd get a decent crop every year. But you could plant 10 different varieties if you wanted to. You'll get apples in year 2 and 3 depending on the size of the trees that you plant. If you start with a small whip, you're going to wait an extra year to get those apples. But if you start with a tree that's feathered, and that's a tree that's got some small branches on it when you plant it, if you start with a feathered tree that typically is a little more expensive, you can see apples in the 2nd year. So that's another huge advantage to planting a tall spindle. You don't have to wait 5 or 6 years to get apples. So something else that you'll want to consider with the tall spindle planting is you don't want all your fruit to come off at the same time. And it's really that way with any planting. You don't want to plant trees, you don't want to plant a John of Gold and a Liberty and a Golden Delicious if you can't do something with all those apples, because they're all going to come off within 2 or 3 weeks of each other. And so think about that with the tall spindle. You can actually have about a 3-month apple picking season with the tall spindle. If you wanted to start in, say, August with Gala, and you could run into September with the apples I just mentioned. You could go up into October with Enterprise or Gold Rush or Pink Lady. Those are great apples, and those October apples just by design tend to store just a little bit better. So that's another great option for the tall spindle. What you can expect with these trees when they get mature in 4 to 5 years is anywhere from a half to a bushel production per tree. That just seems to be what they're going to do if they're taken care of correctly. That way, if you got 2 or 3 trees, you're going to get a bushel or so of apples at least off of those trees. So that's something else to consider. The production of these trees is fantastic. Another great advantage to this system is the simplicity in pruning. The pruning system is simply, it's this logic: there are no permanent branches in these trees. None of these branches will stay on this tree forever. You have a main trunk and that's it. So every year you look at the tree and you'll take out 1 or 2, maybe some years 3, but basically 2 of the largest branches in the tree. And they may not be that large, but just a couple of the largest branches. Another big important step is to get into those branches and find if there's any forks. If they split, take out one side. So you simplify, you columnarize your branches. And what these things go to do is increase the amount of sunlight that gets into the tree. You need sunlight to grow apples. So that gets the sunlight down into the tree. As simple as that. Another huge advantage to the tall spindle system is being able to effectively spray your trees as a homeowner. Let's face it, we're limited to backpack sprayers, 1-gallon pump sprayers, and being able to reach into the canopy of a 12 and 15 foot tall semi-dwarf tree is pretty tough. But with the tall spindle that you pretty much cap at about 10 feet, and the canopies themselves are made to be a little bit thinner for sunlight penetration, well, it also allows your spray to penetrate, and you can target the tree specifically, and you can be sure to reach every bit of that tree. And also picking apples. Picking apples is a lot simpler with a dwarf tree on the trellis system, like the tall spindle. You can pick most of the apples from the ground. You'll need a ladder to get to the upper reaches of the tree, but you're not dangling off the ladder. You're not trying to reach out 6 feet off of the ladder to pick apples. You can set it in there and pick everything right there in front of you. There is a big difference in picking the apples, and that is another major advantage to the tall spindle system. Now, the bad news. You knew there was going to be some bad news. That is the initial cost to the tall spindle planting system. Those same trees in those catalogs that we love to look at, well, they cost a little bit of money. And you're probably going to spend 25 to 30 bucks per tree, depending on the size of the tree that you get. You're going to spend 25 or so bucks, and maybe that doesn't even include shipping. So right out of the gate, you're out 250 bucks. Okay, then you've got the actual trellis system that the tall spindle goes on. Tall spindle, my tall spindles are a 4-wire system. So you've got 4 trellis wires, you've got posts on each end, you've got some anchor posts, you've got some more hardware there, and maybe even you'll need to buy a couple of tools to put this thing up. It's not difficult to do, but you'll probably need a couple of tools. And you know, it's going to run you, it's going to get you up there another 150 bucks. So you're $400 into this when you start. But the great thing is the production starts early and you get a lot of fruit. So these trees can be a little problematic when it comes to diseases. Once they start, they tend to carry quickly from tree to tree. It's like getting across the street from your house versus traveling across an interstate. It's a lot easier to get across the street. So these trees are planted so close together, it's a lot easier for disease to travel from one tree and hop right into the next. That's why we stay on top of things. That's what this channel is all about, helping you stay on top of things. So stay on top of that, manage it when you see it, manage it before you see it, but when you see it, nip it in the bud and take care of it, and you'll be fine. That's probably the 2 biggest disadvantages to this system. That's a lot to consider for an apple growing system. I understand, but you know, in my opinion, the tall spindle apple planting is perfect. It is the perfect backyard orchard planting. The footprint is small. It's very simple to take care of. And again, that's what this channel is all about. I want to take you through a season here in 2020, and you're going to see how I take care of the tall spindle system here at the house, just like I do a vertical axis system and a semi-dwarf system here at the house. But please continue to watch, and spring's coming. It's a little ways out there, but spring's coming, and we got plenty to do before then. So we're going to talk soon about taking care of the traditional semi-dwarfs and what we've got here with the vertical axis and just how it differs a little bit from the tall spindle. And maybe consider doing something like this for your backyard. Picking apples with family and friends is a lot of fun. Just something to think about as we go forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you real soon with that other video.